Good morning from Bridgetown, Barbados. I'm Julian Rogers at the headquarters of the Caribbean Development Bank. I'm here to introduce you to the 2022 Caribbean Risk Conference. It's been a couple of years in the making, but we're underway thanks to the cooperation and partnership of the Caribbean Development Bank and Crif SPC. And today we have gathered thousands, yes, I said thousands of delegates, not just here in Barbados, but certainly around the Caribbean and beyond, to focus over the next 2 days on the value of risk management, not just in the public, but in the private sector as well. And we hope that by the end of it all, it will trickle all down to ordinary folk, recognizing the importance of risk management. We have it in our lives every day. We may not recognize it that way, but we hope at the end of this exercise that you have a better appreciation. So my job is very simple. That is to introduce the key people. And I'm going to do that first by welcoming two key people. One represents the Crif SPC, the other the Caribbean Development Bank. They're the drivers of this process, of this meeting today. And so I'm very pleased to welcome the Chief Risk Officer of Crif, Malcolm Boma. All right, so I'm just going to change this around just a little bit and have a welcome. And how better to welcome than the Chief Executive Officer of Crif, Mr. Isaac Anthony. Isaac.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator, and good morning to all. Your Excellency, Dr. Carla Barnett, Secretary General of CARICOM, Dr. Jean Leon, President, Caribbean Development Bank, our distinguished guests here at the CDB Conference Center, the board members of CDB and as well as Crif, panelists, speakers, our member governments from both the Caribbean and Central America, colleagues, friends, all participants, regionally and internationally, a pleasant good morning to all of you. It is a pleasure for me to be here today to bring remarks on behalf of Crif SPC, formerly the Caribbean Catastrophe Risk Insurance Facility, and welcome you to this conference. This conference has been in the making for some time, as my colleagues at Crif and other colleagues at CDB would know. As you heard earlier, Crif and CDB launched in 2017 the Country Risk Management Initiative, and following this launch, there was an initial idea to host a workshop on country risk management for technocrats in the region. Truthfully, this conference we are hosting today was not our ambition in 2017. We had envisaged a much smaller event. That workshop was put on the back burner as we felt that we needed to collect some more data on governments in the region with respect to the approaches that they were employing to integrate several risks that they are exposed to. We contracted the University of the West Indies to undertake this assessment and to determine how Caribbean countries compare to international best practices in the area of country risk management. I will not give you the results of that now, as you will be privy to this information in Cafe Corner number 2 tomorrow morning. But let me step back a bit and provide you with the genesis of this entire initiative on country risk management. As far back as 2012, Crif had been in discussion with Swiss Re on the work that they had been doing in countries in Africa and on the issue of country risk management. And the idea of bringing an initiative such as this to the Caribbean was born. In fact, at CDMA's Conference on Comprehensive Disaster Risk Management in 2009, Crif and Swiss Re presented the idea of country risk management to participants. Later that year, we would publish a first technical series that featured country risk management. as part of our initial involvement on the topic of country risk, we prepared a concept note documenting an approach to country risk management in which we identify the role of potential partners and donors. We first approached the Caribbean Development Bank to join us kickstart this initiative, and the rest is history. Krif and CDB have had a long relationship which started from the inception of Krif in 2007, and from then to today, we continue to engage in a range of initiatives that support the development of our member governments and the Caribbean region as a whole. CDB has been an important donor to Krif and its members. For example, for more than 10 years now, the bank has been paying Haiti's premium for its Krif insurance policies. And you would recall that last year, Haiti received a payout of about $40 million, Krif's largest payout to date, following a magnitude 7.2 earthquake that struck the country in August, significantly impacting the city of the sky. The payout was received within 14 days of the event. Ladies and gentlemen, advances in technology, globalization, deregulation have made economic, social, ecological systems increasingly interconnected. In addition to opportunities for growth, this interconnectedness has created a set of risks that cross national borders and can be part of a complex, globally interconnected system. For example, the risks associated with climate change are borderless. Within our borders, risks are rising. Risks associated with debt, inequality and poverty, crime, violence, unattached youth, rising unemployment, ecosystems degradation, among others. The interconnectedness of these risks and the complexity of the risk profiles of countries today are significantly affecting the achievement of national targets and indeed development goals. Approaches to this integrated risk management is even more timely as we seek to recover stronger from the impact of COVID-19 pandemic. The global pandemic, which started out as a health emergency, quickly morphed into a socio-economic crisis of immense proportion, leading to unprecedented disruptive effects on the lives and livelihoods of people all over the world, and while exacerbating inequalities among already vulnerable and disadvantaged groups. I pause here to wonder what the situation would have been today had there been in place pre-COVID a comprehensive risk management framework for health pandemic. Needless to say, significantly fewer lives would have been lost to COVID, and the socio-economic losses would have been far less, with much less persons pushed below the poverty line. Adaptation to this compendium of risk places enormous pressure on regional governments who are charged with the responsibility of ensuring fiscal prudence, maintaining critical infrastructure, while balancing lives and economic livelihoods under increasing budgetary constraints. Notwithstanding the multi-hazard environment that the Caribbean countries exist in requires a focus and need for adjusting the current risk management strategies among our member governments. I therefore call on governments in the region to adopt a more holistic view on how they approach risk governance and risk management. As many of you already know, Krif is the world's first and most successful multi-country, multi-peril risk pool, providing parametric insurance coverage to limit the financial impact these devastating events are causing by providing quick financial liquidity when a policy is triggered. At Krif, we define quick as being within 14 days, 1-4. We started out providing parametric insurance products for tropical cyclones and earthquakes to 16 Caribbean member governments. Now, 15 years later, we have expanded both our membership and our portfolio to include products for excess rainfall and the fisheries and electric utility sector, with other products in the making. Our members are 22 governments in the Caribbean and Central America, along with one public utility company. One may ask, why would Krif venture out and delve into areas of risk beyond environmental and climate risk, or focus on areas of risk that appear to go beyond our mandate? The answer is quite short and simple. Krif is a development insurance company. Of course, we provide insurance to member governments, but also we provide other products and services to enhance the overall development prospects of our current and future members. This initiative in country risk management is one example, but we have several others. We have partnerships with regional organizations that lead to the development of programs in disaster risk management. We work with NGOs and other civil society organizations to support resilience building across communities in the Caribbean. And we are building a cadre of persons who will become our future leaders in disaster risk management and financing and climate change adaptation by providing scholarships and internships. Since 2010, we have invested about $2 million and supported scholarships at both the graduate and undergraduate levels. Indeed, the conference aides over the next 2 days who will be supporting our panels, writing blogs, writing conference report, etc., are past Krif interns and scholarship winners. We will continue to work with academia and support the University of the West Indies to undertake research and pioneer new inventions and innovations to adapt to climate change and to enhance resilience. The list goes on. Under this country risk management project, we will make the necessary investments to create the enabling environment, build capacity and expertise among our member governments, supporting a more proactive approach to addressing current and future risks. We will work to develop our members' tools such as integrated all-hazard risk management frameworks and promote the institutionalization of country risk coordinators. These country risk coordinators will act as a central point of contact for the purposes of managing the comprehensive multi-area risk portfolio that our members are exposed to. The investment by Krif will serve as part of our support to advancing the sustainability or the sustainability agenda of our members and indeed Krif itself. As Gary Cohen, Vice President of IBM, once said, and I quote, "If you don't invest in risk management, it doesn't matter what business you're in, it's risky business," unquote. We will do our part. As we delve deeper into this initiative, we will engage additional regional organizations and development partners such as CDMA, the University of the West Indies and CARICAD, and international partners such as the Atlantic Council Adrian Arch Rockefeller Foundation Resilience Center, organizations that we currently have MOUs with, among others, recognizing that partnerships will be critical in addressing risk both in an integrated manner and holistically. I want to thank UE for the work they did on the 3 studies as mentioned earlier. Tomorrow, CARICAD will join Krif and the CDB teams to launch the Integrated Risk Management Training Program for the region's public sector. Turning to the conference, we expect that this will be the first of several conferences on the matter of country risk management, and that we will advance scholarships on the topic and develop a practical solution so that our members have access to tools to support them in the quest to better understand their current risk profiles and anticipate future risks towards making better decisions in support of development. And that is more sustainable development. As I close, I thank my board of directors for its unwavering support for this initiative, as well as Krif and the teams, the CDB teams who worked tirelessly to ensure the successful conference. I look forward to the various panels and other activities and implore our audience to participate and share your perspectives and ideas with us as we work collectively to create a resilient Caribbean where no one is left behind and our region's development is sustainable, inclusive, and equal. I thank you.
Thank you very much, sir, for setting the stage for the deliberations today. And as the young people would say, if asked what Krif was, I'm sure they would use the word crisp, based on your very speedy reaction to the demands of this region. And I can speak particularly of Dominica in the wake of the back-to-back hurricanes, for instance. 14 days, you've lived up to that target every time. So congratulations. Let me now turn to another one of the hosts, and from the Caribbean Development Bank, I'm very pleased to introduce the president of the institution, Dr. Janice, who prefers to be referred to as Jean Lyon. Please, welcome.
Thank you very much, Julian. I almost hesitated to say all protocols observed, but let me acknowledge first Excellency Carl Bennett, Dr. Carl Bennett, for Secretary General of CARICOM. In-house with us, we have members of the board. I also recognize members of the diplomatic community. Of course, it would be remiss of me not to recognize and pay special tribute to our past president, Dr. Warren Smith, who would have started the very journey that we talked about, getting this conference off the ground. And we can equally recognize those who are in the audience outside of here, private sector stakeholders, members of officials of governments, distinguished guests, of course, our development partners as well. Thanks very much for joining us today. Special thanks equally, and I left you out specifically because I wanted to give you honorable mention, our development partner on this initiative, the Chief Executive Officer of the Caribbean Catastrophe Risk Insurance Facility, Mr. Isaac Anthony. And a special welcome to the entire online audience that I have not yet called upon. Let me say a hearty welcome, good morning, good afternoon, or maybe evening, wherever you are at this point. I think it is quite clear that opportunities for virtual conferences have now allowed attendance from a wider cross-section of enthusiasts than physical presence meetings would actually permit. So on that score, it is, I think, a very promising line that we can actually have those meetings. In fact, Mr. Rogers talked about thousands of people at this moment on the call. And I think this rather high number of registrations and attendees underscores the beginning of what could become, I would argue, an extremely impactful initiative for the Caribbean. So zoning in on this morning, my key message to all is that risk mitigation is essential to sustainable development. That's the bottom line and why we are here. As we at the bank have argued before, sustainable development is a holistic concept that embodies an ability to self-perpetuate while advancing. Hence, resilience is paramount. If we admit that the broad dimensions of resilience are interconnected, then it becomes clear that the coherent solutions for a sustainable development paradigm require an integrated solution for a resilience ecosystem. By extension, risk mitigation must also imply an integrated and internally coherent risk management system. As such, we have organized this conference to start the process of bridging this sustainable development gap. Specifically, the objective of this conference is to promote a specific perspective on risk management at the sovereign level. To this end, this conference is about, one, highlighting the importance of risk mitigation to achieving sustainable development goals. Two, carving out a blueprint for how that can be done. And third, guiding the development of a risk ecosystem to ensure risk management remains integrated and effective. We hope that by the end of the conference, you will agree that isolating the management of different types of risk is not the most effective way to mitigate risks. In fact, we hope you will conclude that risk management must be holistic and encompass a coherent set of policies that can address the diverse aspects of an evolving risk ecosystem. Caribbean countries are known to be among the most vulnerable states, and the accumulated impact of a variety of natural hazard and macroeconomic shocks have significantly slowed our development and risk not achieving the Sustainable Development Goals by 2030. The path towards achieving SDGs 1 to 3 and SDGs 8 to 10 have been directly impacted by unmitigated risks. The less than adequate resilience associated with unmitigated risks has also indirectly impacted the remaining SDGs by reducing and in some cases reversing the accumulation of government's resources that can be directed towards the achievement of these SDGs. The need, therefore, for a system of risk mitigation is therefore critical to the achievement of our mandate to contribute to the harmonious growth and development of the countries and peoples of our region. Over the last 2 decades, the path to achieving SDGs has been constrained by risks such as rising debt levels, intensifying climate events, overdependence or concentration in a single product, social inequalities, and exposure to external shocks. In addition to this, the impact of COVID-19 and indeed recent geopolitical tensions, in particular the Russia-Ukraine crisis, have only served to accentuate the implications of our structural challenges. New emerging risks have also developed, such as rising global inflation, accelerated increase in interest rates, technological inequalities, and food and energy insecurity. These risks clearly interact and have a compound impact on our development outcomes. So the natural question that we should be asking is, how can Caribbean countries effectively conduct risk mitigation? And this brings me to the second pillar of the conference, namely that risk management must incorporate the fact that risks are interconnected. At the institutional level, an integrated enterprise risk management framework, for example, the framework used to manage risks at CDB, uses a suite of tools to enable the effective management of the disparate array of existing and emerging risks. Our message here is that these tools are equally applicable at the sovereign level for use by governments to conduct a sound integrated framework that combines both climate and non-climate risks. It is important, therefore, that heads of governments embrace this way of thinking as it relates to risk management at the sovereign level. Using this integrated approach is the only way, in our minds, to effectively conduct risk mitigation, which, as we've noted, is crucial to achieving the Sustainable Development Goals. Currently, the identification and mitigation of risks by Caribbean countries are often done in an isolated manner, where the inextricable link, particularly between climate and non-climate risks, are not made. This leaves countries therefore vulnerable to the impact of shocks persisting and concomitantly maintains a high risk profile. Currently, international investors demand high returns for investments in the Caribbean to compensate for these relatively high risks. Those high returns, in turn, translate into high funding costs for those very Caribbean governments, which puts pressure then on fiscal sustainability and reduces the fiscal space for the achievement of the SDGs that we are seeking to undertake. Another way, therefore, to view this is that the implementation of appropriate risk mitigation policies improves risk profiles and, by extension, credit ratings. Further, the improved risk profiles would have a permanent effect on creditworthiness, which enhances access to more affordable financing. This perspective provides a solution, we think, that implies a permanent impact on our ability to access more affordable finance, while reducing, at the same time, the reliance on what I prefer to call a temporary impact, lower rate concessional financing. In other words, let's not focus so much on the lower return, the lower cost, but fix in a permanent way the risk mitigation, fix the risk profile, and therefore automatically guarantee a sustainable, long-term, lower affordable rate than seeking to get one-off rate reductions called concessional finance. In this context, therefore, we see risk mitigation as a catalyst towards achieving SDGs. And this can happen, one, by creating more fiscal space from lower funding costs that can now be deployed to pursue SDGs, or by way of accessing more affordable capital to pursue those very SDGs. Risk reduction cannot be achieved, however, without the adoption of an integrated approach to risk management. Therefore, risk mitigation policies becomes a foundation for lower risk profiles and improved potential to achieving the SDGs. So against this background, what then are the tools and policies that we need in the Caribbean to make that leap into an integrated risk management framework? And that then brings me to the third pillar of the conference. Risk management must encompass a coherent set of policies that can manage, as the CEO just mentioned, all risks in a well-developed risk ecosystem. This allows me to reiterate the point I made earlier, that risk mitigation cannot be done using an isolated approach for each type of risk. As such, the effectiveness of risk mitigation relies on a well-developed risk ecosystem, which recognizes the interconnectedness among the individual elements. The main elements of this risk ecosystem include individuals, institutions, frameworks, and processes that govern the identification and mitigation of all risks in a country, ensuring that this is done in an integrated and therefore effective manner. The development of this ecosystem, we believe, relies on 4 key tools, which we will be elaborating on in the conference. The first tool is a framework that categorizes risks that are relevant to a country and identifies the interconnected nature of those risks. The second tool is a framework that develops indicators reflecting the severity of each risk and an evaluation of the impact of planned measures to reduce those risks. The third tool is a framework that evaluates the availability of additional preparedness, response, and recovery measures that can be implemented and the likely impact of those measures. The fourth tool is a governance framework that ensures that the previous 3 tools involved, all decision makers, technocrats, and those affected by those risks in an integrated risk management process. Allow me, therefore, to elaborate here on a key aspect of the third tool. At CDB, we have been developing the concept of an internal resilience capacity metric that recognizes the duration of recovery after a shock, and that duration is dependent on vulnerabilities inherent in our structural challenges, the magnitude, the impact, and the persistence of that shock that occurred, access to finance, and the internal capacity of a country for recovery. Needless to say that vulnerability and a resilience assessment tool that can measure those impacts and guide the appropriate policies and needed finance will be an important part of this risk management architecture. So those 4 tools that I talked about that we will be discussing in the conference, to develop them and implement them, we are recommending 4 key areas of policy that can be and should be implemented to buttress this risk mitigation effort. First, countries should improve governance of internal risk assessment processes. Governance is key. The second, countries should elect national risk coordinators to create an effective conduit for knowledge transfer across the Caribbean and for guidance in the implementation of an integrated sovereign risk management framework. Third, countries should actively focus on risk reduction as a means to reducing funding costs and financing an expedited path towards achieving the SDGs. And fourth, adequate and appropriate risk tools should be maintained in order to properly assess the operating environment and to sufficiently incorporate the mitigation of new and emerging risks, because this is never a static issue. It's always evolving, and we cannot be caught standing thinking that we had covered when new risks are actually emerging. So in support of these policies and these recommendations, CDB and Krif SPC are currently developing, as we've heard, an integrated sovereign risk management blueprint that can be implemented into the national platform of the respective countries. We are also developing a terms of reference for the respective country risk coordinators that I mentioned in the previous section. So in conclusion, it is our vision that this ecosystem will enable an integrated approach to effective risk management and lead to a more expedited path towards the achievement of the SDGs. And with that, I'd like to wish you all a very productive conference, and do hope that this is the beginning of a journey towards utilizing risk mitigation policies and tools to help move us one step closer towards the development imperatives required under the SDGs. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. We continue now with a special address coming from the headquarters of the Caribbean community in Georgetown, Guyana. And I'm very pleased to introduce the Secretary General, Dr. Carla Barnett. She of Belize, but of the Caribbean, to deliver a special address to you. Dr. Barnett.
Dr. Jean Leon, President of the Caribbean Development Bank, Mr. Isaac Anthony, Chief Executive Officer, Caribbean Catastrophic Risk Insurance Facility, distinguished speakers, ladies and gentlemen. I very much appreciate the invitation to address this conference, given the relevance of the issues you will be discussing to the urgent priorities facing the member states of the Caribbean community. I do apologize for not being there in person. That was the plan. All the arrangements are in place, and then, as the specialists in risk present at this conference would understand, unexpected and unpredictable events intervened, and my plans had to change. Much apologies to all involved, especially to my friend and colleague Jean, with whom I will have to make alternative arrangements to have all those other conversations we were to have had in person. I was more than pleased to accept this invitation, given my past association with both of the organizers of this event, having been on the ground during the conceptualization of the Krif and having had 2 spells at the CDB. The collaboration of these 2 financial institutions, which are so important to our community, has produced significant benefits to our member states as they seek to manage their country's various risks. Indeed, as they seek to address the increasing risks associated with climate change and its manifestations across their economies, and as they live through the impact of the COVID pandemic, quite aware of the risks associated with reopening their economies, while quite certain of the impact of not reopening their economies. Indeed, management of risk is a crucial element in the drive towards creating a resilient region. More than that, building resilience really means achieving success in managing risk and uncertainty as we seek to build stronger economies and societies, and as we seek sustainable long-term development. Risk management, even if we do not call it that, is at the core of plans and strategies for post-COVID-19 recovery. Rebuilding our economies and lives in a post-COVID-19 world urges us to confront our vulnerabilities in more effective ways. The COVID-19 pandemic did not only devastate CARICOM economies, but it also provided the opportunity to test regional crisis preparedness and management mechanisms in ways we had not previously envisioned. As we look back over these past 2+ years of crisis, we can say that enhanced regional cooperation and our extremely proactive regional crisis management mechanisms allowed us to contain COVID-19 reasonably well, even though there are many lessons that we learned along the way and many things that in hindsight we would probably do differently. But that is what risk management helps us to do. We plan, we learn from the past, so we do better in the future. Another lesson from the COVID-19 pandemic is that the strength of the regional crisis response is inextricably linked to the quality of the national crisis preparedness and management system. Such a system must include comprehensive domestic arrangements which facilitate the identification, measurement, monitoring, and evaluation of the country's risk portfolio, and the pursuit of the necessary actions to minimize the exposure and to take advantage of the emerging opportunities, the so-called upside risks. Now we must focus our attention on securing a sustainable recovery program, which reprioritizes member states' progress within the context of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development and in the Regional Integration Agenda. This has taken on even greater urgency. In doing so, the issue is not whether we could have done better, but what lessons we have learned that would allow us to build back better and transform the community towards economic and climate resilience. One of those lessons is that the risk landscape confronting CARICOM governments, that is, the combination of the probability of an event and its negative consequences. We are now squarely in the path of the unforeseen, coupled with a high probability of the negative. In addition to disaster risk, CARICOM governments contend with the intricacies of other risks, from natural hazards to man-made disasters, from external economic shocks to global pandemics, from geopolitical risks to environmental vulnerabilities, from insecurity to societal risks. I therefore welcome the initiative by the Caribbean Development Bank and the Krif SPC to execute the integrated sovereign risk management in the Caribbean project. This project is expected to result in the institutionalization of a more proactive and integrated approach to country risk management by our governments as the basis for better policymaking and the adoption of more evidence-based solutions. While our governments are very familiar with planning for disasters, the many other risks and uncertainties which could undermine the socioeconomic development of our member states call for an integrated approach to risk management. The inherent vulnerabilities of CARICOM member states and susceptibility to a range of diverse risks have resulted in a governance approach which has sought to control exposure and maximize outcomes in the public interest. Systemic risks, a pandemic like COVID-19, which could lead to the breakdown or serious dysfunction of an entire system and whose contagion effects can spread beyond national borders, are of particular concern. Governments therefore need a broader perspective to address the multiplicity of hazards and vulnerabilities to discern their interconnectedness and to take the appropriate action, rather than our traditional approach of treating events separately. Sustainable post-COVID recovery will be a viable endeavor if CARICOM states can successfully confront risks and pursue the emerging opportunities to build back better. The empirical evidence shows that effective risk management can be a powerful driver of economic development and climate resilience by reducing the adverse effects of crises while creating the space for stakeholders to take advantage of the opportunities to improve their circumstances. In particular, governments have an essential role to play in managing systemic risks by fostering an environment for shared action and responsibility at different layers of society, from the household to the regional level to the international community. The Caribbean community already has in place the Regional Comprehensive Disaster Management Strategy 2014-2024, which acknowledges the multiple hazards confronting member states and which served as the platform for the regional response for the COVID-19 pandemic. The strategic objective of the CDM is the integration of disaster management considerations into the development planning and decision-making process of member states. The strategy embraces a cross-sectoral approach and focuses on cross-cutting themes such as gender, climate change, environmental sustainability, and information and communication technology. In so doing, the CDM recognizes the interlinkages among the risks confronting CARICOM member states in their pursuit of disaster risk reduction, and therefore embodies an opportunity for knowledge dissemination on managing cross-sectoral risks in CARICOM member states. I strongly recommend the involvement of the Caribbean Disaster Management Agency in the elaboration of the Integrated Sovereign Risk Management Project. I also note that SEDIMA recently launched the Caribbean Resilient Recovery Facility, which is a regionally owned and driven mechanism for the coordination of ex-ante and ex-post resilient recovery services to SEDIMA participating states. It is designed to provide strategic guidance for recovery efforts across the entire Caribbean region and to guide the efforts of all stakeholders concerned with recovery. So what are the major risks confronting CARICOM member states? It is now well known, as per CDB analysis and reporting, that except for Guyana, CARICOM member states experienced significant GDP losses in 2020, which continued into 2021 and were much higher than other regions. The continued uncertainty in the global economy and the emergence of more virulent and transmissible strains of COVID-19 constitute a major risk to the resumption of a sustainable growth trajectory for CARICOM states. The volatility of international commodity prices, especially energy prices, disruptions in the supply chain, the current unfolding of the Russia-Ukraine conflict, and the resulting price increases in commodities such as wheat and fertilizers, as well as the prevailing rising interest rates, inflation rates in major markets all contribute to the global uncertainty, which has resulted in the IMF downgrading the 2022 growth projections worldwide. In addition to the global uncertainties, the rapidly widening development financing gap, initially estimated at US $5 billion, as well as the extremely high, unsustainable, and still growing debt burden, represents other sources of risk for CARICOM member states. This is a debt burden that will continue to grow along with disaster relief and infrastructure replacement during and after every hurricane season. It is a debt burden that reflects the increasing per unit cost in constant prices of infrastructure, such as roads and bridges, as a result of the impact of climate change, sea level rise, and stronger storms. It is a debt burden that not only weakens fiscal performance and erodes fiscal space, but by doing that, it increases economic and financial risks by definition. So far, multilateral efforts to ease the liquidity bind on developing countries continue to largely exclude CARICOM member states. The proposed eligibility criteria for the newly launched Resilient and Sustainability Trust show this reality, as does the lack of progress on a comprehensive sovereign debt workout mechanism for middle-income developing countries. Closely aligned with the economic risks is the reputational risk that CARICOM member states have endured as a result of the heightened regulatory action on the anti-money laundering, combating the financing of terrorism landscape, AML-CFT, and the global tax governance initiatives, which devolved into unilateral action by various developing countries. Changes in the international regulatory standards for global taxation and the AML-CFT regime have led to the blacklisting of several member states deemed to be non-compliant from time to time and resulted in financial marginalization and risk aversion by international investors. I believe that the full impact of the risk management practices of the international regulators, the so-called de-risking practices, need constant study. The uncertainties and the actual loss of correspondent banking relations is likely to be driving legitimate business on the ground. When the formal financial markets cannot work, business resort to informal markets to survive. Furthermore, the threat of loss of access to the international banking system can lead exporters of goods and services to keep as much of their foreign exchange earnings abroad as possible in order to be able to ensure ready access to foreign exchange when they need. This would have the effect of reducing the flow of export earnings into our economies. These two results of international de-risking practices, therefore, may well result in the expansion of the informal sector and increase the likelihood of macroeconomic instability, thereby increasing some of the very risks that we are seeking to mitigate. In short, the prevailing economic risks, whether global, regional, or national, could result in the further erosion of the socioeconomic progress that CARICOM member states have achieved over time. Then there are the risks occasioned by climate change that threaten our very existence. As developing economies reliant on sectors vulnerable to changing climate patterns, such as tourism, agriculture, and fishing. Caribbean nations will continue to be greatly affected by rising sea levels, changes in rain patterns and temperatures, and increasing intensity of natural disasters, as confirmed by successive reports of the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change and brought into sharp focus by the 2020 State of the Caribbean Climate Report, spearheaded by the University of the West Indies. On Monday this week, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change released the third installment of its sixth assessment report. In the words of co-chair Skia, it is now or never if we want to limit global warming to 1.5 degrees. Small islands and low-lying coastal development states of this world cannot abide by never. Action is necessary and it is urgent. We know this when we consider events like Hurricane Maria, which wiped out more than 220% of Dominica's GDP in 2017, or Hurricane Dorian, a Category 5 hurricane which impacted the Caribbean during the 2019 Atlantic hurricane season and was one of the strongest Atlantic hurricanes on record and the strongest hurricane to have ever hit the Bahamas. This storm hovered over the Bahama Islands for 48 hours before leaving and caused 74 deaths in Abaco and Grand Bahama, with hundreds missing and thousands homeless. The 2020 hurricane season had a record-breaking 13 named tropical storms, which included 15 hurricanes and 6 major hurricanes, that is Category 3 or higher, the most storms on record for any year. It was also the 5th consecutive year with an above normal Atlantic hurricane season, and the second time in history the Greek alphabet was called into use, extending to the 9th letter with Hurricane Iota. In addition, the month of September was the warmest in the historical record as it relates to daytime high temperatures in Aruba, Guyana, and St. Lucia. Other devastating disasters include earthquakes in Haiti in 2010 and again in 2020, the eruption of La Soufriere volcano in St. Vincent and the Grenadines, heavy rainfalls and floodings throughout the Caribbean, bushfires, drought, rising sea temperatures, coastal erosion, sargassum, overfishing, and the destruction of marine life. These catastrophic events cause increasing damage and loss in CARICOM member states, and the role of climate adaptation and mitigation measures in allaying these risks must be underscored. Loss to the Caribbean and the Americas region, according to the UN Office for Disaster Risk Reduction, accounted for 53% of reported global economic losses between 2008 and 2017. And the heaviest cost of storms relative to the size of their economies falls on the small island and low-lying coastal developing states of the Caribbean. As I said earlier, the COVID-19 pandemic also presented certain opportunities for CARICOM member states. The acceleration towards a digital economy, occasioned by remote working and schooling, organizing and delivery of social assistance across IT networks, is one such opportunity. The prospect of building for the future within the context of a stronger push for investment in technological infrastructure is clear. This will require investments in innovation, infrastructure, and human resources. In addition, the legal and regulatory framework for the digital economy will need to address at minimum issues of affordability, access, and security, that is data privacy and protection. A key facet will be new technology transfer models, which will use current opportunities to flip the current technology paradigm, which sees us as consumers and not producers of technology. Within the region's private sector, appropriate support for small, medium, and micro enterprises is critical, since those enterprises contribute more jobs per dollar of investment than large enterprises and account for approximately 70% of jobs. We have to figure out how to do this more effectively if job creation is seen as a critical means to strengthen the overall economic and social resilience of Caribbean society. Principally, however, Major investments in infrastructure are needed to substantially build on this resilient pathway. I cannot stress enough that there must be frank discussions in the appropriate forum to examine the pledges and commitments made, the barriers to concessional financing, and the capacity gaps of SIDS in developing proposals to advance their resilience. These discussions are critical to accompany and complement the excellent technical work in adaptation and resilience already ongoing, but still insufficient in our region. Achieving sustainable recovery and resilient economies post-COVID-19 cannot be viewed solely within the context of pre-COVID-19 conditions. The realization and impact of environmental, geopolitical, economic, and other risks highlight the importance of adopting an integrated approach to managing country risk in order to increase community resilience at the national and regional levels. Doing so would require all of us, member states, developing finance institutions, regulators, academia, the private sector, and civil society to carefully consider the correlation of risk factors. The operationalization of an integrated country risk management framework, robust enough to strengthen social safety nets and with the capacity to adapt to shocks, will allow us to build back better, and is therefore more than welcome. The time is opportune for country risk management to be a key imperative for the Caribbean as we forge a pathway to resilience and sustainable recovery post-COVID and prepare for the other crises that are sure to arise. I thank you very much.
And we thank you very much, Dr. Barnett. You've given us our charge today. And so that gives me an opportunity to do two things. One of them is many of you who are joining us online, let me remind you that you have an opportunity to comment, etc. And I see that some people have already taken advantage of that, complimenting Dr. Barnett for her presentation. Risk management is at the core of plan strategies. You can keep on doing that because we're going to capture all of these reactions, of course, and share in a final document that will be circulated. So great initiative by the CDB and other partners involved. I hope we all take this opportunity to network with each other to create a better living environment for future generations. So thank you. Keep those comments coming. And wherever you are, hey, Turks and Caicos there. We certainly look forward to coming back to Turks and Caicos for the annual governors meeting. Spot on, right? And of course, from British Columbia, Canada, of course, being a great partner, and our friends in the Dominican Republic also joining us as well. So wherever you are around the world, I might just be able to boast about that. We're happy to have you join us in this very special session today and tomorrow. Now, here's the opportunity to better understand what we're going to do in the succeeding period of time. Two people who have had, I suppose, the job, I would say, of wrestling this challenge of presenting this conference. Let me introduce them both to you. First of all is the Chief Risk Officer of Krif. I tried to introduce him earlier, Malcolm Boma. Sorry, I see it. Every time I come to you, I get it anyhow. So let's talk about the Chief Risk Officer of the Caribbean Development Bank, Malcolm Boma, and my good colleague, Elizabeth Emmanuel, who has been teaching me more about this meeting than anybody else in the last month or so. She's the Head Technical Assistance and Corporate Communications Manager of the teams for Krif. So Liz, you're up first, and then we'll hear from Malcolm.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Thank you, Julian. Dr. Jean Leon, President, Caribbean Development Bank. Mr. Isaac Anthony, Chief Executive Officer, Krif SBC. Our distinguished guests live from the CDB Conference Center, panelists, speakers, colleagues, friends, all participants, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, because you're from all over the world. Welcome to this conference, which promises to be exciting, informative, and engaging. Registered are over 1,200 representatives from Krif and CDB member countries across the Caribbean and Central America, participants from public and private sector, the development partner community, persons representing civil society organizations, academia, and the general public. We also extend a special welcome to the many students from several universities here in the region and beyond. You are our future leaders, and we are happy that you are interested in engaging and being part of these conversations. I will now turn over to my colleague Malcolm to share a little more with you. Malcolm.
Thank you, Liz. And again, good morning and welcome to both our presidents, from President Jean from CDB and Mr. Isaac Anthony, all protocols observed. Interestingly, we have also been able to attract conference attendants from all continents, including as far away as Australia. This for us demonstrates the shared interest we have on the risks and threats to the region and the desire to find optimal solutions to address these in a holistic way. There is certainly an understanding of the complexity and diversity of areas, sectors, and topics covered by the subject of risk and the implications these have for our developmental prospects. As you heard from our moderator, Julian Rogers, the two-day conference is part of a wider risk management initiative spearheaded by Krif and CDB titled Integrated Country Risk Management, which has its origins at a launch by both entities at the CDB Board of Governors meeting in Turks and Caicos in 2017. But turning to the conference itself, let me say that over the next 2 days, participants will hear from 30 panelists and speakers who are uniquely placed to discuss key points and trends in risk management, whilst also sharing their perspectives, insights, and views. A wide range of risks will be covered, including those that impact children, cybersecurity, regulation, climate risks, and more. It will also cover the importance of all hazards policy frameworks and clarify the roles of recommended country risk coordinators. More importantly, emphasis will be placed on solutions and how to mitigate the plethora of risks that countries in the Caribbean and other small island developing and coastal states are exposed to. How can we anticipate and plan for future risks? How can we devise innovative solutions today to solve issues and challenges to enable the achievement of countries' long-term developmental goals and the 2020 Agenda for Sustainable Development? We are also eager to hear from you, from our audience, on your ideas, proposed solutions, and perspectives on the multiple topics that this conference will cover. The detailed schedule has already been shared with you and is also located on the conference website, as well as the virtual lobby, where you can also view the profiles of all panelists. And for Krif's members in Central America, the conference is being translated into Spanish real time. The conference has a keynote speaker, you heard from her, Dr. Carla Barnett, 4 panel discussions, 2 cafe corners, and the launch of 2 initiatives. I will now ask Liz, my colleague, to share with you a bit on each of the 4 panels, the 2 cafe corners, and the 2 launches. Thank you.
Thank you, Malcolm. Panel 1 has been designed as a lightning talk style panel, and it's titled The Regional Landscape for Advancing the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. The panel gives focus to exploring solutions Caribbean countries can employ to build forward stronger, inclusive, and equal post-COVID-19. Panel 2, titled Country Risk Management and Global Risk Governance, Managing Existing and Evolving Risk, has been designed as a Twitter-style panel with tweetable soundbites. This panel will explore topics including ESG factors, climate risk and credit ratings, the future of money, the importance of good governance and public sector accountability and transparency, the emerging trends in cybersecurity, and the importance of disaster risk financing as part of fiscal prudence. Panels 1 and 2 will be on today, and panels 3 and 4 will take the spotlight tomorrow. Panel 3, Demystifying Climate Risk, is a Connect the Dots panel discussion and will begin with a presentation by the Commonwealth of Dominica, or on the Commonwealth of Dominica, a small island state here in the Caribbean which was ravaged by Hurricane Maria and is now emerging much like an ibis after a storm, building back better, stronger, and equal with the intention to become a best practice example in resilience for other small island and coastal states. Panelists will give focus to new and emerging climatic risk, as well as possible and innovative solutions, including the importance of disaster risk financing and new financing instruments. Panel 4, the call to action panel, is titled Best Practices in Integrated Risk Management at the National and Institutional Levels, focusing on challenges, lessons learned, and best practices. Panelists will provide case examples and best practices in integrated risk management from organizations and countries, and will focus on how much of what they have learned could be adopted and adapted by other countries, and particularly since. With respect to the two cafe corners, the first one under the theme Wither Another Global Pandemic, Lessons Learned and Directions for Future Preparedness, will start by looking back at the last 2 years, but importantly, will focus on how we move forward as countries, governments, the private sector, academia, civil society organizations, how we can collectively work together to prepare for and respond to future exogenous shocks. Cafe Corner 2, when Malcolm and I will join the team and speak to you again, acts as a precursor to Panel 4 and will provide context to the integrated risk management in the Caribbean project and the overarching thrust by both Krif and CDB in country risk management. We also would launch two very interesting initiatives. One is a training program mentioned earlier by my CEO, Isaac Anthony, on integrated risk management, and the other, a new publication for children titled Hazards, Disasters, and Climate Change. The launch of the children's publication will feature some of our future leaders, children between the ages of 8 and 12. We encourage you to visit the booths at the conference that have been set up by several of our partner organizations. Of course, we are Caribbean, and the orange economy is very important to us and underpins much of what we do. As such, we will have lots of entertainment from artists across the region. Do enjoy. Once again, as the leads of our various agencies, of our two agencies, Malcolm and myself, in organizing this conference, Malcolm and I are humbled by your interest and are very happy by your presence. We know that throughout the 2 days, we will be seeing more and more persons making their way to the virtual platform. Panel, sorry. We thank you.
Thank you too. Give a hand to a very special team of people making sure that this conference works for you. Well, a meeting like this would be incomplete without something as special as we're about to introduce you to. It's a spoken word piece featuring a young lady called Cindy Celeste. She's Barbadian. She's a poet, a writer, creative entrepreneur. She's an arts activist, a language advocate, using performance poetry and literature to encourage social discourse on issues of identity. Cindy is a NIFCA award-winning poet who represented Barbados on the international stages, such as the Women's of the World Poetry Slam 2021 and the Verstat Arts Festival in South Africa in 2019. She's also published in the NIFCA Winning Words Anthology of 2021 and the Caribbean Writers Literary Journal, and is the second place awardee of the inaugural Black British Writers International Poetry Competition. She's coordinated several community outreach projects, including youth open mic nights, school workshops, and community writing workshops. And her most notable performance to date is We Ain't Done, which is part of the Pride of Nationhood Celebration 2021, commemorating Barbados's transition to Republican status. I'm very pleased to introduce you to Cindy Celeste, Barbadian youth poet, ranked number 21 in the world. And after you hear her piece, you'll rank her number 1 in our world.
Hi there. You probably already know me. I mean, I have been told I have a familiar face, but just in case you've seen me around and can't place it, or passed me in the street and can't trace it, my name is Risk. No, there's no need for you to tell me yours. I have already interacted with most of you before, so believe me when I say I'm quite sure the pleasure is all mine. But if you still can't find our interactions in your mind, you're probably wondering what corner I've come out of after all this time. And I'm inclined to remind you that if I'm even slightly recognizable to you right now, it's because you've already met me someplace, sometime, and somehow. Allow me to elucidate. Let me do more to demystify the signs signifying my existence, paint a picture illustrating why I already know everything about you. But you've hardly realized I have always been right in front of your eyes. You've developed this instinct to think you can't link the risk you see in one space to the risk you've already seen somewhere else, because it isn't possible for you to reconcile that one risk could worm its way into so many different realms, and your brain becomes compelled to think risk can't be omniscient. Each one must be someone else, or else. It doesn't make any sense. Yeah, that's my talent. To camouflage and chameleon to each unique situation, to hide many personalities within a single identity, and when the time comes, simply don the one I deem contextually relevant. So even those who are aware of my presence only know me superficially, can only see what is immediately obvious about me, what is painfully apparent. I could be doing it right now and most people wouldn't even be able to tell the difference. I don't mean to be a brag, and I'm not often one to flex. But to be honest, y'all make it so easy, I would bet that I could tell you all the roles I'm playing next and still get away with it. For example, I'm the one who makes it possible for water to stagnate in steady pools to create perfect breeding grounds for mosquito larvae. Generations of pests who carry a buffet of diseases in their veins and become catalysts for high infection rates of chikungunya, Zika virus, and various intensities of dengue. I am the anxiety that bids you to say your prayers when a new weather system forms and they give it a human name, so you beg that the next storm season hurries by on its way without harm or incident because you're afraid there's no telling how well your current infrastructure can take a hit from a raging hurricane. I am the lack of warning that precedes every single earthquake. The balance in imbalance, hiding chaos in poor drainage and water catchment systems to make them proponents for flooding and water scarcity in near equal proportions. I am the under-exploration of economic diversification, limiting opportunities to drive away coming generations to leave in search of better options to make their living. A brain drain causing droughts in social care systems by creating a dangerous reliance on finite reservoirs of reserves already running perilously low. I am trolling around outdated digital frameworks, chomping at the bit to rip through bytes of sensitive information and destabilize nations section by section. I am the mischief that incites faceless avatars to cyberbully and take advantage of your children. I am tucked under complicated jargon, written on food nutrition labels, able to craftily cloak the long-term impacts of ingesting all your favorite snacks so I can lull you into the trap of lifestyle disease. I can do all of this and more with relative ease, and the reason is that you have trained yourselves to believe that each and every one of these is discrete. And in actuality, they're all connected. And it seems your conversations have all historically reflected a tendency to treat the symptoms in the areas affected instead of the entire disease, just creating a short-term ease while leaving me free to wreak havoc on the rest of the societal body. Can't you see my capacity to create a slippery slope? That the scope of my ability affords me the opportunity to make a single danger into many simultaneously, so that a cybersecurity snafu could just as conceivably be detrimental to health and the environment and the economy. You still don't believe me? Imagine what happens to productivity in any industry when the computer systems that guide it cease to function properly. How, if there's no work being done, the economy grinds to a halt, a deceptively simple technological assault with devastating effects. Imagine how a financial institution going under hinders development, or how a natural disaster can make a country more food import dependent when farmers' fields are flooded and local food security is rendered next to non-existent, even if before you had an excuse to feign ignorance. It'd be shocking if the emergence of a global pandemic hasn't been able to make someone like me more evident. So many have their hearts set upon a world without borders and yet forget to account for how technological advancement has played a part in connecting all sorts of different systems, and systems without borders need that same kind of action. I've done my research. Mostly so I can adapt my tactics to the ever-changing landscape and create a strategy where my impact can inflict the most possible damage. Keep you thinking each effect is separate and distinct, so you can't anticipate the extent of the carnage. So you'll get caught up in a loop of being reactive. Does it even cross your mind that every faction should be working together? How different it could look if the whole region was in collaboration. Shift the emphasis from working on the problems in isolation to bringing together the governments and policymakers and organizations to collectively push the conversation in a more fruitful direction. Each plan might look a little different for everyone, but either way, coordination is the root of tackling this problem, beyond identification of isolated issues and towards how to prioritize, anticipate, and adapt to each sovereign situation. Until then, this risk will keep running amok. Though, who knows? Maybe this time, I've revealed a bit too much.
You can't say we haven't used every available media tool to communicate the risk we face. Thank you very much, Cindy Celeste. I'm always marveled at how they remember all of those words, literally, because very often it is not a script, it is something that they know very well, so deeply. Thank you very much. We're very, very moved by that. Talk about moving. I want to say thank you to all the people who are participating in this, whether you're in this room with us here at the conference center, the CDP, or around the world. And remember to keep sharing with us your reactions. There's a lot ahead of us, and we hope that you'll stay with us for as much as you can over the next 2 days. And somebody commenting just now, this is awesome, well-researched, etc. I have to tell you, it's been great work. Very, very relatable and powerful delivery and excellent. Celeste is really first class. I want to thank the presenters today, first of all, for this opening session. Their contributions have all given us a riveting focus on the job at hand. And we trust that we'll all continue to focus as deeply as they're urging us in this important work. We're going to take a coffee break here at the conference center, and we urge you to do the same wherever you are around the world. It may not be coffee, but it may be something else, but that's your choice. But we'll come back at 11:30 our time. 11:30 our time. We'll gather again, And then we'll have the first of our panels where we'll take a regional landscape look for advancing the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, which was echoed by most of our key speakers earlier. So thank you again, everyone. And let's get back together again at 11:30 Bajan time.